Hi everyone, I hope I am audible and visible to all of you. In today's webinar, I'm going to discuss the things that future lawyers must know today. And there are about 17 different topics, so obviously I'm not going to be able to go too much into detail in each, but I'm going to give you a nice overview so that you understand what are these issues. So if you can see this list here, the first thing is artificial intelligence. Now, many times you may also hear the word machine learning along with it. That's a little different, and that's not really going to create too many legal implications. So we're going to primarily talk about artificial intelligence. Then we're going to talk about blockchain, crypto crime and investigation. So the criminal aspects and forensics and investigation around cryptocurrencies. Then cryptocurrencies in themselves, what are the kind of legal issues they give us? Cybercrime, DAO, which is a very interesting concept called decentralized autonomous organizations. Then DeFi or decentralized finance, digital assets, e-commerce and fintech, Econtracts, gaming, metaverses, NFTs or non-fungible tokens, smart social media, Web 3.0, and regulatory sandboxes. So these are going to be the topics that we are going to discuss. Just give me 1 second. Those of you who are watching live, please feel free to post your questions in YouTube itself. And those of you who are going to watch this later, no problem. You can still come and put in your questions there and I'll try to answer them. So let's start with artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence is basically when a computer is starting to think like humans. Now, if you look at some of the popular movies like Eagle Eye or maybe even Terminator, it's always shown in a very negative way that the day computers start to think, they're going to turn on human beings and kill us and all that. Well, I don't really think that's going to happen in real life. As of today, computers and artificial intelligence have reached such a level where a patent has already been granted to something invented by an artificial intelligence system. Now try to understand the implications of that. Today, it is human beings who can create new things like inventions, and then we apply to the patent office. And if it meets the criteria of the country we are applying in, we get a patent over something innovative that we have invented. But now we are beginning to see a world where humans have invented artificial intelligence technology, and that artificial intelligence technology is going to make inventions. And you'll be surprised to know that certain countries have even granted patents to something invented by an artificial intelligence system. So that's absolutely mind-blowing kind of stuff. And as things progress, AI is going to get better and better, and a lot of legal implications are going to come. So that is something future lawyers need to understand, because that's going to be a really complex legal area also. The second one is blockchain. I'm sure all of you have heard about blockchains, and especially blockchain and crypto is over the news all the time. Now, fundamentally, blockchain is a technology. Using that technology, certain computer networks are created. And in the world today, there are thousands of blockchains which are running. So what's so special about a blockchain? Firstly, a blockchain provides immutable data integrity, which means you can prove in a court of law that that information recorded in a blockchain has never been tampered. So blockchains use some of the existing technologies. Like if you look at the Information Technology Act in India, it talks about hash functions. It even defines them, I think in section 3. It defines digital signatures. Blockchains also use these same technologies. So a blockchain is going to use hash functions, going to use digital signatures, and thereby enable immutable data and smart asset lifecycle management, wherein you could create an asset on the blockchain. It could be a cryptocurrency, it could be a real world currency, it could be, say, equity shares, gold, bonds, anything. And once you create it on that, the blockchain takes care of everything. The creation, the escrow, the transfer between parties, even the destruction of that asset. So naturally, blockchain and crypto is going to now move into almost every area of finance. And that creates a lot of very interesting opportunities for lawyers to specialize in that area. Like I said, if you have questions and you're watching live, please feel free to post them below. And I'll keep trying to answer them. Let me just see if I can see any of your questions. Okay, not yet. Then let's move on to crypto crime and investigation. So now crypto, obviously we hear a lot of times that it is misused for a lot of crime. Now, where does it get misused? So it gets misused in human trafficking, money laundering, as you can see the list here, narcotics trading or illegal drugs, operation of illegal or unregistered money services, ransomware payments, scams, rugs and hacks, and terrorism financing. So in fact, here, let me give you a little personal background. So I come from the cybercrime and cyber law background. And I remember this was about 2010 or 11 when I was investigating a case of the Colombian drug mafia using Bitcoin for payments. And that's how I got introduced to the concept of Bitcoin many, many years ago. So even today, a lot of cryptocurrencies are misused for this. I'm not saying all, it's a very small percentage, but that is an important aspect. So this whole concept around the crime, investigation and forensics of cryptocurrencies is another very, very lucrative area for future lawyers. Moving on, cryptocurrencies in themselves. Now let's take an example. If we look at El Salvador, that's the world's first country that has actually recognized Bitcoin as legal tender. Now, in case you don't know what legal tender is, let me explain that to you. So in India, Indian rupee is a legal tender, which means you can buy and sell anything using that. And if somebody doesn't accept it, that can actually be a crime. So that's the power that legal tender has. Now imagine a country like El Salvador has recognized Bitcoin as legal tender, which means you could walk into a McDonald's in El Salvador and pay using Bitcoin. So that's another very, very interesting innovation that has happened. There are hundreds of other cryptocurrencies which are there. So things like Litecoin, then there is a concept called stable coins. And a lot of people have started to accept payments for goods and services using cryptocurrencies. So that's another huge area of opportunity which arises for future lawyers, where so many legal agreements and contracts need to be made if businesses and individuals start to use cryptocurrencies for buying and selling services and products. So another really, really good area. Then we have, of course, cybercrime, which has been around now for so many decades. See, what we must understand why cybercrime is constantly growing is because as money moves online, obviously crime is going to follow. So all the kinds of crimes that we hear about today, whether it is ransomware or whether it is phishing, email spoofing, UPI related scams, financial frauds, any kind of an illegal activity where computers or technology are used becomes a cybercrime. So we already have the judiciary, the police, the law enforcement, the tax enforcement who are already learning how to handle cybercrime, how to prosecute those cases, how to defend them, how to adjudicate those. We have a very strong legal framework in place in most countries of the world today to handle cybercrimes. And that continues to be a very important area for future lawyers. Then we have DAOs. It's a very, very interesting concept. Consider a mutual fund. So a lot of people get together and put money in a collective scheme like a mutual fund, and then some expert decides how to invest your money and you get the returns. Now imagine automating this, where thousands of people like you and me become part of a decentralized autonomous organization or a DAO. And depending upon how many coins or tokens of the DAO we own, that percentage, based on that, we can vote how that money should be utilized. And that's an absolute amazing thing, where it decentralizes things. You don't need to go to mutual funds or conventional centralized organizations, but individuals can now start taking more control of their money and figuring out how to invest it. Now, every time that you talk about a DAO, there are lots and lots of complex legal issues that arise. Let me give you one example. The US state of Wyoming has now come out with an interesting law under which a DAO can automatically get registered as a limited liability company. So imagine you create a purely internet-based entity and a law automatically recognizes that as a company. It's happening in one country of the world. Slowly, it may happen in almost all. And a simple definition of a DAO would be an internet community, so you can read that here, with a shared bank account. So any number of people connect to each other on the internet, they don't even need to know each other, and they pool money, it becomes like a shared bank account, and together they decide what to do with it. So for lawyers, that again creates a huge area of opportunity. Then we have a concept called DeFi, or decentralized finance, which today is worth like billions of dollars. So what happens is, in the conventional world, you have banks and stock exchanges and commodity exchanges who are centralized and they are regulated. And you can put your money there and then you can take part in some financial activities. But there's KYC. You need to be accepted there. You need to get approvals. DeFi, on the other hand, is completely decentralized, which means anybody without KYC could also take part in these financial transactions. And you could lend money, you could borrow money, you could stake. There's so many things which are happening there. Naturally, a lot of governments are also worried that if this happens in an unregulated fashion, that may create a lot of problems. But well, it's already a huge market worth hundreds of billions of dollars. And every DeFi use case requires a lot of legal issues to be complied with. You would have contracts, you would have agreements, you could have compliances, because a lot of banks are also now beginning to move in. So that again creates a huge opportunity for lawyers. Any questions so far? If you have, you can keep posting them in. Let me check. No, nothing so far. Okay. Then we have digital assets. Now, digital asset is actually a very wide term. It includes things like crypto assets, digital evidence, medical records. So we made a small list for you here. Even domain names come into that, intellectual property, art, collectibles, even human talent today can be wrapped into digital assets. And those can be then traded globally. Every single legal or digital asset would have a lot of legal issues that need to be complied with, a lot of documentation that needs to go in, another huge area of opportunity. Then let's look at e-commerce and fintech in itself. Ever since we had the coronavirus related lockdowns, e-commerce has really grown multiple times. People are now realizing how easy and convenient it is for us to order stuff online. And that's just going to keep growing. And every time that these things grow, new platform comes in, creates a lot of legal issues. And there is a whole new concept called smart contracts, which comes into the picture. I think we're going to cover that in a later topic soon. So every time that we talk about this, legal issues come in. Then fintech. India is probably today the world's #1 country when it comes to fintech or financial technologies. So when we look at things like Aadhaar, we look at things like UPI, these are absolute game changers. And probably no other country in the world even comes close to this. So as fintech continues to grow, so do the legal implications. So the Reserve Bank of India, for example, has come out with so many directions. They could be around account aggregators. They would be around peer-to-peer lending. And all these new and innovative fashions, prepaid instruments, as startups start to get in, all of them, whether it's a startup or a bank or a financial institution, they need to understand what are the, for example, the RBI related laws on this. What are the compliances they need to do? Again, very good area of opportunity for us to handle as lawyers. Just give me a second. I think we have a question here. What is your view on personal data and data privacy? That's an excellent question, and probably an issue that we need to add here to the kind of things that you should know about. Now, a lot of the new innovations that are coming are completely changing the meaning of data privacy. Let's take an example. I think we're going to go to metaverses very soon. So when we talk about metaverses, which is like a digital avatar of yourself, could go into a digital universe. Now, today, when we talk about our data, we are looking at things like what Facebook has or what Google has. Our data is usually data points about what we do. Now, that is triggered based on the websites we visit. It is triggered based on the purchases we make. It is triggered based on the conversations we have on the phone. And now that is just going to grow. As when we take our virtual avatars into the metaverse, every action that we take is going to give signals to these big companies about what to sell us. And that's going to just take your personal data to an altogether very, very different and a very broad level. Now, I'm still waiting for India to come out with a specific law around data protection and privacy. As of right now, we usually look at the Information Technology Act. Specifically under that, we usually look at Section 72A, 43A, and the rules which are also been made. So today, that's what is governing data privacy. But that's obviously not enough, which is why India is working on a completely revamped and in-depth data privacy law. And I'm really looking forward to that. And then we also need to realize one thing, that today data is not restricted to jurisdictions. It could be all over the world. So if you, as a startup, for example, or you're advising a company, they are going to have data in, say, Europe, then you need to follow GDPR. If it's going to be in the US, you need to follow their laws. So it's no longer that you only follow laws of one country or jurisdiction depending on where you are based. No, data could be global. You need to follow global laws when it comes to that. So that's another very interesting area of opportunity that has come. Another question is, what is it that should be most careful to get into it? How do you feel it is not a good tech? Well, that's a little confusing question for me. Can you kind of try to reword that question? I'm not understanding what you really mean by that. So do please reword and repost your question. Then we have e-contracts, which are electronic contracts. I mean, they've been there forever. So whenever you go to a website and you click a button, I agree. Well, you are entering into an electronic contract. Today, you can even, almost everywhere, you can use digital signatures to sign contracts. So that creates its own set of legal implications and issues, which are very, very important for future lawyers to understand. Then we have the whole world of gaming, which is not just about video games. But today, you have this concept of play to earn games. You have so many online gaming platforms that have become massive. I mean, in fact, if you look at their market capitalization, they are in like tens of billions of dollars each. Now, that creates its own legal terms. Like, for example, is it gambling? That completely changes the legal perspective. When it is gaming, today people are able to buy assets in the game. And the best part is they can now trade those assets globally. Let me give you an example. Let's say you were playing a game many years ago. You earned, say, guns inside that. So because of a level you reached, you were given 50 guns or weapons or something. Now, that was initially some kind of a digital thing within that game. It did not really have a real world economic value, but that's changed. Today, when you play that game and you earn something, you can actually take that asset, which is a game or a gun or anything, and go onto a marketplace and sell it to somebody else. Because those assets, in-game assets, are now being created as NFTs or non-fungible tokens. And you could take them and sell them in the real world. So that suddenly empowers the game players to a whole new level. And of course, it brings in a whole new level of legal complications also. Let me move on to metaverses. Now, metaverses is one of the concepts I really love the most. So if you've seen movies like Avatar, that at one time people are standing and looking like normal humans, and then suddenly that same human being sits in a machine and goes to a new world, which was in that, I think, a planet called Pandora, where suddenly they become these tall blue looking people, right? Now imagine you could wear a goggle or specs or something, and suddenly you are in a digital world where you can interact with people in a three-dimensional immersive world. Now, some of you may say, how is it going to be different from Zoom? Like right now, I'm sitting in my home and you're sitting in your home, but we're having a conversation. But you and I know that this is a conversation happening online. It's on a platform and you're in front of a computer and you can see me in a two-dimensional way. Can we actually shake hands and feel this hand, pressure of the hand? No. Now imagine we wear this. So, you can see on my screen, this person wearing this kind of a headset. Now, once you wear that headset, you and I can actually look at each other as three-dimensional people, just like we do in the real world. And if we shake hands, the haptic gloves will ensure we even feel that. If I box you or you box me, I'll be able to feel that pain in future. Today, that technology hasn't reached that level. But I remember using something called Second Life way back in 2003, which was one of the first metaverses in the world. And I remember in 2006, Duran Duran, which was a very popular rock band at that time, they did a virtual rock show inside the metaverse. So now imagine you and I in different parts of the world, meet in the metaverse, take a walk, attend a rock show together. That's the kind of stuff that's coming. And it's amazing. And today we even have platforms where you can buy virtual land. And that land, I mean, it's limited in supply. So if I buy that land, I can use it. I can build a house on it. I can rent that house out. So these are the kind of amazing things that are happening. I could buy virtual clothes. And the beauty is now brands like Nike and Gucci have started to issue virtual versions of their creations. So you could buy Nike shoes but not real ones, virtual shoes. You could buy a Gucci handbag, which is a virtual handbag created as a non-fungible token and only usable within the metaverse. So what happens to intellectual property issues there? Like, let's take an example, or some designer copies a Gucci handbag and starts selling digital versions, and cases like these have taken place. In that case, the creator of that clothes or handbag in the real world can file a case in the real world court against the designer in a virtual world. And in the past, the courts have held that you cannot copy someone's real world design and create something virtual. You need to take licenses. It's going to completely change the way in which intellectual property works. Okay, there's another question. Let me read that out. What kind of tech should we be alert of in evolution of these digital frontiers? Which one you think is the most insecure and should be careful, like AI or big data? That's a good question, although it's kind of outside the purview of today's session, because a lot of our audience today is going to be from the legal background. So I'm not going to be able to go too much into the tech. But yes, AI is a technology. Big data is a technology. Blockchains are technologies. And all these technologies have vulnerabilities. Nothing in the world is 100% secure. That's just not how the world works. Anything that a human can create, another human can hack. So that's the way it goes. Another question is, shed light on deep web, darknet. Yeah, sure. So when we talk about this dark web, we are talking about a whole different internet. Like, let's take an example. Today, when you go and you do www, you are on the conventional internet. You do a Google search, you're on the conventional internet. Now imagine there is a parallel internet, which you cannot even access through the normal Google Chrome browser. You need a separate browser called the Tor browser. And then domains don't look like something.com. They will have very long and weird looking symbols. And Google doesn't even work there. But a lot of illegal things happen there. People can buy illegal drugs, weapons, name it. So that's a whole different thing. And for a very long time, that is being misused by criminals and terrorists around the world. And it's kind of very difficult to investigate. And that's the reason a lot of criminals and terrorists use it. And a lot of the law enforcement people don't actually like it. So yeah, that's an interesting question. There's another one. Have you mentioned all these opportunities and applications for lawyers in the future? When will this come into practice and what should one do to implement this? That's a very good question. So many of these are already there, like Metaverse Classic. If you look right now, as of today, there are multiple Metaverse platforms in the world which are already worth billions of dollars. So they've already started business. The Metaverse has been here for decades. It's not a very new thing, but it's just picked up a lot now. And Facebook, one of the largest social media platforms, they have renamed their company to Meta. So we are expecting huge developments to come from them in 2022. As about your question of how do you get into this, we are launching a course on future law where we are going to go very deep into each of these topics. So right now I'm just giving you an overview, but we're going to go deep into each and every topic, and we'll be announcing the course very soon. Let me move on. NFTs. Now, I love that area because personally, that's the area I specialize in. So an NFT is a non-fungible token. Let me explain to you briefly what that means. When you hold money in your bank account, let's say you have $1,000, each of those rupees, so you have 1,000 rupees, each rupee is identical to the other rupee. There's no difference. So we call it a fungible asset. But when we look at it differently and we talk about things which are not identical, so I could take one piece of art, say the Mona Lisa, and tokenize it. Now that Mona Lisa is unique. So a token created around it would consist and comprise one Mona Lisa or one painting. So that's why we call them non-fungible. Fungible is when all units of something are identical. Non-fungible is when each thing is unique. So every time you buy a piece of land in the metaverse, it is unique. Every piece is different. Pricing could be different. So in that scenario, those are non-fungible tokens. And then you could, buy them, sell them, trade them. That's what can be done. Then let's look at smart contracts. Now, smart contracts is actually kind of a misnomer. They're neither smart nor they're contracts, right? It's a way of automating things. So let me give you an example. Today, when you want to take an insurance policy, you go to a company, an insurance company, you fill up a form, could be digital. And let's say you take flight insurance. that if my flight is delayed by more than 2 hours, I will get some payout from the insurance company because I will incur some damage because. Now today you file an application, and then if your flight is delayed, you make another application, a claim. The insurance company verifies, then they may or may not pay you. That's a pain. Now imagine you just click a few buttons on your phone, buy this automatic insurance policy. When your plane lands, you don't have to make any claim. You don't have to make any claim, and the insurance company, right? They pick up this data from, say, the blockchain and from the airline authority. And if the flight is delayed, your payout is automated. You don't really have to make an application. You could immediately get paid completely digitally. And that is where smart contracts come in. So they are automated, enforceable agreements. And for lawyers, I would say that is the absolute biggest opportunity, because a lot of legal issues also need to be dealt when you're creating smart contracts. It's not just about the tech. The tech is 50% and the law is 50%. Then let's go to social media. Now that's evolving and growing at a phenomenal pace. And the whole meaning of social media is going to change with metaverses. India has also now made a specific law around social media and the compliances, which means every social media platform now needs to do a lot of compliance. And there are hundreds of platforms today. It's not just Facebook, Instagram. There are so many new apps that are coming out. Audio podcasts, video podcasts, all of them come under social media, and they need to follow all those compliances. Massive area of opportunity. Then we come to one of the final ones, which is Web 3.0. So Web 1.0 was the world when internet was very static. So there were web pages put up by companies and you could just read them. There was not much interaction. Pretty boring. I remember that time. Many of you may not even have been there at that time. The youngsters probably don't remember the time, but say about till the year 2004, that was the internet for us. Very boring and static. Then came Web 2.0, where user generated content became most important. So the Facebooks of the world came in. People like you and me create data on those platforms, and that data is what people then watch. So let's take an example of our conversation right now. I am creating this data, you are interacting with me, and now we are going to put this up on YouTube. YouTube is not creating the data, you and I are. And then different users will come and look at that data. That's Web 2.0. Web 3.0 is the next level where blockchain, cryptocurrencies, non-fungible tokens come into the internet. And suddenly the whole thing changes. And that again is a very new and a very, very exciting area, which is already here. Again, billions of dollars is already there in that field and creates a tremendous opportunity for lawyers. And finally, we have the last one, which is regulatory sandboxes. That's an amazing concept. So let's take an example. Say today, there is a law which prevents you from doing some very innovative technical thing. So you can apply to the government regulator saying, I want to do this thing, but today the law doesn't allow it. If the regulator thinks it's a good idea, they will say, we give you permission to do this thing for a limited time period, for a limited number of clients, and for limited financial value. You do that, we will supervise you. We will then look at your data when this experiment is done. And if we like it, we give you legal permission to do it. Absolute mind-blowing innovation. And you'll be surprised to know the Reserve Bank of India has already had multiple batches of regulatory sandboxes in India. The SEBI, Securities and Exchange Board of India, has done that. IRDA, the Insurance Regulatory Authority, they have also done that. And that is fueling a lot of innovation. So countries like the US, UK, Singapore, Dubai, India, they're all having regulatory sandboxes. Now, when anybody wants to apply, a startup applies to a sandbox, they need to fill up forms. They need a lot of legal issues to be dealt with, data protection laws to be covered. That creates another massive opportunity for lawyers who understand the technology, and then they are able to guide their clients on taking this ahead. So these are the kind of opportunities that arise. Any questions? Anybody else has questions? So these were the 17 issues that I wanted to talk to you about. Of course, this 17 is not going to remain static. It is going to keep growing. Every few months, new innovations come in. So we will keep you updated and keep telling you about the latest things that are happening. So if there are any questions, I'll take them for a few seconds. Otherwise, please feel free, if you're watching this later, feel free to put your questions and we'll answer them. Okay. So great. It was a pleasure speaking to all of you. And I look forward to more such sessions in the future. One second, there's some question. Let me just see. Curious to know how judiciary will work in the metaverse. Yeah, that's a very good thing. So in fact, I remember my wife's first comment when she tried using one of the newest metaverses was, she says, multiple people have already come and tried to hit on me or tried to misbehave. So suddenly you realize eve teasing is one of the first crimes happening in the metaverse. Now think about it. How would it work? If the digital version of somebody creates a crime in the metaverse, would they be liable to go to jail in the real world? I would say yes, depends on the crime. So if eve teasing is a crime under the Indian Penal Code, you are doing a digital version of that crime, then I think in the real world under Information Technology Act and IPC, you should be held liable. And I think that's the way it's going to go. How the judiciary is going to handle it, again, we'll have to look at digital evidence. And that digital evidence, a court would appreciate under the Information Technology Act and then maybe give you the punishment. So yeah, that's a very interesting question. And I'm waiting to see how the judiciary is going to handle these things in the future. So do we need virtual courts, e-courts? Maybe we would. Well, as of right now, since our conventional courts are already handling the digital evidence, well, I think they would be continuing to handle that under the Evidence Act. So 65B would still apply to digital evidence, irrespective of whether that's in the metaverse or in any other digital form. So I don't see the need for new e-courts. I would say the conventional courts will be able to handle this under the conventional Information Technology Act and the Evidence Act. Any other questions?